Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, who came in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, who came 9,000 miles to seek and save the lost, and give us this guidance on how to eat to live, which foods to eat, and when to eat them, and when to fast, that we may live long, healthy lives. I come and greet you in the name of peace. Assalamu alaikum. So we're here to discuss how to optimize our 3-day fast. And before I begin, I just want everyone to know I'm not here to supersede or usurp any guidance. I'm coming to give perspective as a biochemist who has spent 30 years studying nutrition and to hopefully help people to have a more effective fast and a more pleasant fast so that we can really benefit from the benefits of these 3-day fasts. So without further ado, I am going to launch my PowerPoint. Thank you for joining me. All right. How to optimize your 3-day fast from the guidance. And if you eat once a day, you should fast every month for 2 or 3 days. By doing that, there will be no poison left in the body at the end of the year to make you sick, even 1 hour. How to Eat to Live, Volume 1, page 30. And then on page 19, it says that fasting is the greater cure for our ills, both mental and physical, than all of the drugs of the earth combined into one bottle or a billion bottles. Allah, God, in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, has taught me that fasting with the right kind of food is the cure for our ills. How to Eat to Live, Volume 1, page 19. So what are some of the benefits of these 3-day fasts? And if you aren't familiar with this, probably most of you are, they are enormous. Now, this is probably a complete water fast, which we don't do, but I think you can get the sense that most of this is going to happen maybe to just a slightly lesser degree when we do have our coffee or tea with a little sugar and hopefully some fat, and I'll discuss that. So at 0 to 12 hours, this is still within our really normal eat once a day, but our insulin levels drop. So it's still worth mentioning because high insulin is extremely problematic and feeds metabolic disorders. Our blood sugar declines. We use the glucose or the energy that's stored in our livers. Our digestive system gets to rest. And when the digestive system isn't active, that allows the body to focus on healing and repairing other areas because it's not trying to absorb and distribute all these nutrients. And inflammation begins to reduce. And so this is one of the biggest benefits of just eating once a day is that it generally really, really reduces inflammation. So your body begins to shift from using recently eaten carbohydrates to tapping into stored energies. I do want to say it also lowers your metabolic rate. So once you start eating once a day, you're going to have a lower metabolism, but that's going to reduce inflammation and oxidative stress overall. So it's going to be like a slow burn instead of heating up your metabolism really fast, which is what often happens when people eat like 6 or 8 little small meals a day and they get skinny because their body just burns that are really, really hot, but that also increases inflammation and free radicals. So by only eating once a day, we actually do lower our metabolic rate. So if you start eating again, yes, you will gain weight very quickly, but it reduces free radical production, reduces inflammation, and that's what allows that longer lifespan is reducing oxidative stress. So as we move to 24 hours, our normal eating once a day, 1 meal a day, your glycogen stores start to get depleted. The body starts to shift to burning fat. Ketones begin to rise. And a lot of people experience this as improved mental clarity. So, and this is where it's really important not to be having a second cup of coffee or tea with sugar in the morning. That caffeine might give you more mental clarity, but it's also going to give you more jitters. And I'll talk about that more. Your blood pressure and your triglycerides often improve. So your body actually becomes more metabolically flexible and it becomes more efficient at burning fat and producing ketones that provide a clean, steady fuel for your brain and body. So I know when I do my 72-hour fast, I almost look forward to it because I usually actually feel better. I feel really clear. It's too easy to eat more and feel heavier when you can, to have that pizza and you're like, I didn't eat all those carbs. But anyway, going on. At 24 to 36 hours, this is where we really start the cellular cleanup, and it really intensifies beyond our regular one meal a day. It's called autophagy, and what it is cellular recycling. One of the things I want to mention here is when we were young and we used to get illnesses like the measles or chickenpox, those viruses actually preferentially cull or destroy cells that are aberrant or just not very healthy. And so it actually could be good for the body to get rid of all those unhealthy cells if the illness obviously wasn't too severe. Now, if all of your body is unhealthy cells, then a viral illness can have just a devastating impact. But if you're constantly eating one meal a day, and this is where, we are told in our guidance that we won't get ill, because it's actually that there will be no suboptimal cells for our body to cull with that illness, because those are the cells that viruses preferentially treat. And so in that autophagy, the body itself can shift away from absorbing fuel and distributing it to the body, or absorbing nutrients, and actually go to the cell and start autophagy, or cleaning up those cells and culling and recycling bad parts of the cell, or even the whole cells themselves. So damaged cells and damaged proteins are broken down and removed and recycled. DNA repair mechanisms kick in. This is where if you have a virus in your DNA, it can actually be silenced. And so genes that shouldn't be on can be silenced, and genes that should be on can be turned back on. So it's more than just DNA repair. It's actually sort of metabolic, going back to the default settings, okay? So growth hormone rises, which can help with increase in muscle mass and other really beneficial and more beneficial sleep. This is where we start to see stem cells. So a significant increase in stem cell production and mobilization. This is where the body is literally regenerating. So we're finding more and more tissues do actually contain stem cells that can rejuvenate those tissues. So your cells begin deep cleaning and repairing, removing waste and damaged components while activating the healing processes. And this is where this longevity, this vitality is going to come from. So as we move from 36 to 48 hours into our 2-day fast, we are in deep healing mode. So we have high levels of autophagy. The inflammation falls even further. And I'm going to talk about sometimes when this may not happen and what adjustments you need to make. Mitochondrial renewal. So your mitochondria make your energy. And when they aren't working, the whole body just doesn't work well. Now, I do want to say that the spike protein and many other modern stressors have very, very much damaged our mitochondria. And some people may need support in addition to fasting to get those mitochondria back in line. And you can access my resources to talk to me about that. But you may need additional support. But without all of the things that we're under, fasting itself was probably in the past enough to renew this energy systems repair. And very extended fasting, that sometimes people do if they have cancer or whatever, can, really kick that into gear. So then once the mitochondria are working well, you're going to have really reduced oxidative stress. You can improve many, many chronic conditions because inflammation and oxidative stress are at the heart of them. Those stem cells that have now been activated help to rebuild immune function, your whole immune system, your gut, your skin, and other tissues. So then this regeneration accelerates, and growth hormone, norepinephrine are optimized for healing. There's enhanced cell turnover, cardiovascular markers may improve. You may have improved mood and resilience. And this is the peak stem cell activity continues, right? Those are highly active in your whole body. And then down out to 72 hours is just going to increase. The body is in deep ketosis. So your systems are rebuilt stronger, genes are activated, longevity genes are activated, ones that are going to renew your whole body. You now have greater metabolic flexibility, in large part because you're healing your mitochondria, which make your energy. And you have sustained high levels of these stem cells that are supporting long-term tissue renewal and vitality. So hopefully this has really reminded you why we do this. And so we're going to talk about how to optimize it. Okay, so in talking with people in my own experience, I have found some key drivers of discomfort during the 3-day fast. Now, one of the first one is not enough glycogen reserves. So your body, when you eat carbohydrates, it actually stores them. It makes it into something called glycogen, which is a starch, but it's um, in animals, right? It's how we store. Plants store it as starch, we store it as glycogen, and it's stored in the liver. And your body can hold up to 24 to 48 hours. So if you aren't eating enough carbs, especially if you're older like me and I don't try to eat a ton of carbs, it can be depleted too quickly. Or maybe you're going to go shoot some hoops with the boys, or you're going to go for a long walk, or maybe even a run and try to maintain some of your exercise during your 3-day fast. That can really deplete it and cause some like symptoms where you just really don't feel good. And we'll talk about how to mitigate that. So specifically with regard to the fast, and specifically with younger people or people who are athletes and have a very high metabolic rate because of their normal high levels of activity, they are definitely going to need to make sure that they have enough glycogen reserves to make that transition to ketosis a little bit smoother. And it's going to help if those carbohydrates are high in potassium. And so 2 carbohydrates, of course, we have our navy beans. Those are actually extremely high in potassium, which really is an electrolyte, which helps your fast. And potatoes are something to consider adding. And I'm going to talk more specifically about potatoes and the guidance a little bit later, and which carbs to use, because there are other carbs like rice and pasta, which are not high in potassium, that could be added to those glycogen reserves. And I want to talk about that in terms of our 1 meal a day as well. Okay. But especially with regard to young active people, that may be one of the things most likely to affect their fast. Now, for everyone, sodium depletion, and I'm going to go into each of these more and more specifically. If you're feeling weak, cold, heavy, you have a headache, or you're dizzy, your insulin drops, which can be really good metabolically during fasting, but that causes the kidneys to excrete more sodium. And when they do that, your electrolyte balance can be thrown off. So just adding a little bit of salt, which is sodium chloride, and sometimes even some potassium and magnesium to enhance your electrolyte balance can be important. Too much physiological stress. So exercise, sauna, running around, and some of us, we get more and more bold during our 3-day fast about what we're just keeping life as normal. I'm still going to go work out. I'm still going to do this. Maybe it's hot outside, whatever it is. We can reach a critical threshold where we're like, oh, I thought it was okay, and now I'm not. Okay. I'm going to talk more about that. And then I'm also going to talk about if we have too many omega-6 fatty acids, which are seed oils. So if we're eating a lot of chips or even too many sunflower seeds, it's a seed oil, that can cause an inflammatory cascade of signaling during fasting. And I'm going to talk specifically about that. So let's deal with each of these specifically. So let's move into sodium depletion. So if you're feeling weak, cold, heavy, you have a headache, or you're dizzy, most likely you have a sodium depletion. So this is really easy. Just take a little pinch of salt, up to 2.5 teaspoons daily, but you probably don't even need that much. Just take a little quarter teaspoon, mix it in 6 to 8 ounces of water, sip on it. It can come from mineral salt, an electrolyte package, some broth if you need a little bit more support. Broth is going to allow you, if it allows you to do the fast without breaking it, it is going to keep you in that state of ketosis that's going to support that autophagy in those stem cells. So you don't need to feel like, oh my gosh, you didn't destroy all of the benefits by taking some broth, especially if it helps you get through it. Or even some salted herbal teas, all ways of replenishing that sodium. And I know one time I was like, oh, I'm just going to go for the run anyway. And then later in the day, I did feel some of these. And just putting that little bit of salt and water and sipping it slowly, I bounced right back. So So sodium supports your fluid balance, your blood volume, your nerve signaling, your muscle function, and it helps prevent weakness, coldness, and headaches. So there's your one first line of defense. So you need all of your electrolytes to be balanced. Salt is the first line, but if you're having muscle cramping, twitching, or palpitations, that could be potassium, and magnesium also can have those same. Sometimes I would get eye twitching, so that could be a potassium or magnesium deficiency. And there's a ton of magnesium supplements on the market, but let's go back. So if you're wired and you have poor sleep, intense muscles, potassium is really important for muscle contraction and nerve signaling and heart rhythm. So you can use an electrolyte mix, making sure you have enough potassium. Sometimes coconut water. I know in the guidance, it's not clear if we can do coconut water. I think it's pretty clear, probably not. The coconut flesh itself is extremely fibrous and hard to digest. I think that's not what we're not supposed to, as far as coconut water. I'm not sure, but it is a high source of potassium if you feel comfortable with that option. Okay. And the little bit of glucose in there is enough if you are feeling poorly at night to allow those muscles to rest and to allow you to continue your fast. Again, these are supports that will enable you maybe not to have to break your fast. I'm a huge proponent of just generally magnesium supplementation. Not a proponent of much supplementation, but magnesium is needed for over 200 to 300 reactions in your body. So super important, including nervous system regulation, muscle relaxation, sleep, right? And so magnesium glycinate is something that can really be helpful in the evenings before bed, as well as the potassium, to help those muscles relax, to help your mind relax. It prevents your mind from spooling out of control. The glycinate is also really calming. If you're constipated, having a magnesium citrate is actually prescribed by doctors for constipation support. So something to consider. But on a fast, if you're drinking water, that might be too much stuff flushing through your system. So only if you're constipated. So let's move on now to the next thing. And this is an issue that really tends to affect women. And that is too many physiological stresses cause a rise in cortisol. Now, women and men are very different in this regard. And when men go work out, their cortisol peaks and it falls very, very quickly. And in response to emotional stressors, men's cortisol peaks for most of them and then resolves very quickly. For women, emotional triggers of cortisol, it remains high. It may come down slightly, but it remains high. So any kind of emotional thing can put women into this fight or flight cortisol release that stays for quite some time. And even if they work out, their cortisol rises and it does not go to baseline like a man's. And it can, if it goes too high, it can actually cause a lot of issues for her. So women especially need to be careful of not overdoing it. And one symptom of that is if you're wired and you can't sleep, you're up from 2 to 5 at night, either generally or specifically during your fast. So cortisol rises during a fast because it's kind of like an emergency response signal. Your body's like, hey, there's an emergency. We don't have enough fuel. Like we need to, decrease insulin, increase all of these other hormones like glucagon, adrenaline, and cortisol, which mobilize the body and keep it able to function, right? And so that some amount of that is normal and is healthy, but if it gets too high, it can cause you to feel pretty poorly. Okay, so potential symptoms could be jitteriness, anxiety, feeling cold, your heart racing, waking later at night, and you're wired, but you're tired. Again, women, people who are under chronic stress, if you have a chronic illness or you just got over a virus, if you're excessively lean, or if you generally have poor sleep or you have a high training load with whatever you're doing. So practical supports. Consider tea with a little less caffeine in the morning instead of coffee, or a lower caffeine coffee if you're sensitive. Add a small amount of cream or butter, ghee, or coconut cream if you feel comfortable with that to your morning coffee or tea. That is actually going to just sort of blunt that response and give your body what you're adding in terms of that cream and butter is fat, and the fat is not as likely to break, it doesn't break your fats in the same way that a sugar or carbohydrate would. So it gives your body enough fuel to tell it, I'm not in an emergency state. And so that will reduce that cortisol peak. Walking, gentle walking actually lowers cortisol, and it can help your liver to release glycogen and break that down for a little bit of blood sugar. So that can be really helpful as well. Again, prioritize your electrolytes, which we just talked about, especially sodium. And then avoid stacking multiple stressors. Don't think like, oh, I'm so used to this 3-day fast. I can fast and I can do my high intensity workout and I'm going to take a sauna and, stay up late at night. Every stressor that you add is going to peak that cortisol a little higher and make it more likely that you're going to hit your threshold beyond which you're going to be feeling that jitteriness, the anxiety, cold, heart racing. Okay. And I think that when we look at this as a benefit, the fasting, 3-day fast, really important, if we are taking it easier, to remember that like the metabolic and the cellular benefits are so great that the cost of not having your workout or whatever it is for a day or two pale in comparison to the rejuvenation that's going on within the system. So if you have pain during your fast, this next one is going to address that. So the fats that you eat every day affect the signaling in your body. Most people don't realize that fats actually signal. They're not just fuel. They make up every cell membrane and they do some amazing signaling in your body. And before the modern day, we have this balance of omega-3s, which are found kind of in fish oils and things like that. And even in grass-fed meat, cows and things like that, and not so much in plants, but maybe in flaxseed, to omega-6s. Now, omega-6s are found in our seeds, whether it's corns, which is a seed, or wheat, or even sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds. All of those are very high in omega-6s. Now, if we had a very natural diet, that wouldn't be a problem. But because we actually process that, we have soybean oil and everything, and all of our snacks either are, like if you think about chips, they're made in either soybean oil or corn oil. All of those are really high in omega-6s. So our bodies get imbalanced from where they would be kind of in a natural state. And when you have omega-6s that make up your cell membranes, it actually enhances an inflammatory signaling cascade in general, but more so during fasting when fats are actually sort of liberated and metabolized. And so high omega-6s from your seed oils, specifically sunflower seeds, can be something that we eat a little bit too much of, supports inflammatory stress signals. So it can contribute to aches and pains and discomfort during fasting and can increase your inflammatory burden when stored in excess. So it's going to magnify any of those inflammatory responses. Conversely, if your balance is more correct to what it should be normally, then that actually supports anti-inflammatory and pro-healing signaling by the fats. It's the fats themselves that are signaling. So it's going to support smoother fasting. It's going to support actually feeling rested and rejuvenated during your fast. It's going to support flexible, healthy cell membranes and balanced immune responses. And so that's supported by fish oils, sardines, cod liver oil, the omega-3. You can get an omega-3 supplement. And I actually started supplement just for this reason. And I noticed a huge difference during my fast in how relaxed and calm and just happy that my body felt. It felt very, very anti-inflammatory. So the key is the idea isn't to supplement these during your fast, it's to supplement these just normal everyday supplementation or eating in terms of, sardines and fish and things like that. And maybe to cut out some of those high omega-6 snacks so that when you're during your fast, you are actually feeling less and less inflammatory than you would every day. Okay, so if you're having pain, that's something to consider. All right, walking. Walking is actually excellent. Gentle walks are excellent during your fast. You may even be able to do a brisk walk, especially on Friday. It just depends on where you're at with everything. But it encourages the use of stored fats as fuel, which some of us still have a little stored fat to use up. It complements the metabolic shift toward ketosis. So it's going to help you gently move out of burning carbohydrates and into burning fats and into ketosis, which starts that autophagy and that cellular renewal. So it helps that process happen gently, while it also lowers cortisol. So maybe during your fast, I will sometimes walk up to like 3 miles, but it's a gentle walk. I'm not in the no pain, no gain. I'm in the no pain, like let me just be happy stage of my life. Okay. So it also provides a mild hormetic stimulus. So this is a stressor that actually helps your body again to go into that autophagy and that cellular renewal without being excessive like a full workout, right? And it helps actually regulate and stabilize your blood sugar. So sometimes actually if you're feeling jittery, a gentle walk can actually, help. Obviously everybody is different, so you have to experiment with what works best for you. And it may be good to get that salt balance in order before you go for your walk so that you have the electrolytes you need. And obviously the heat, how hot it is outside, and all of those things are going to make a difference. So the walking is going to support your mood and mental clarity. It increases your circulation and reduces feeling of sluggishness. Sometimes we might be feeling tired during our fast and use that as an excuse really to be too sluggish for our own good. And it's going to actually help the detoxification of your body by helping that lymph to move forward and that digestive system to reset, right? And to keep those bowels just a little bit mobile because they tend to kind of really, really slow during the fast. Okay, so when we come to break our fast, there's a great benefit of using broth, which is usually somewhat high in sodium when we make it and other minerals. And so it can provide excellent hydration support also because the collagen in there actually helps with the body drawing in moisture as well. So it's excellent for your electrolyte balance, hydration support, nervous system recovery, the warmth and nourishment, signals safety to the body, reduces stress signaling. This is why we have soup when we're sick, right? It really provides amino acids and glycine and proline that are going to help any kind of recovery that our body needs. So it's really giving the body what it needs when it needs it. And it's a very gentle reactivation of the digestive system. So I know there's a broth that maybe called butcher's broth that's actually in the meat section, refrigerated, and it actually congeals, which means it's really gelatin, it's really bone broth. That you can buy. It's a little bit expensive, but everyone doesn't need a lot. They can, get those little bitty tiny Asian soup bowls or something, and break your fast with a broth is a great way to do that. Okay, so I want to review our things. And I'm going to go back into this glycogen again. So we have not enough glycogen reserves can cause some problems in making that transition to ketosis. Sodium depletion or electrolyte depletion, too much physiological stress can peak a cortisol response, and overconsumption of omega fatty acids in sunflower seeds and other snack foods and just in our diet in general can cause inflammatory signaling. So now I want to take a minute and revisit the poor potato, which I think has gotten overly maligned. Okay. And so I want to revisit what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said about some starchy foods and digestion, because whether it's pre-fast and you want to make sure you have enough carbohydrates to make that glycogen for your liver, or maybe you have young kids or young adults who are very active, or you yourself are very active, and you may need a little bit more starchy foods in your diet. And so the question is, which starchy foods are good, or are they good? Because they all actually have trade-offs. So let's revisit what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad did actually have to say. So this is obviously just one quote among many, but I want to give it in context, but because I believe that his concern with starchy foods was their ability to drive diabetes. And that's going to be mostly in older or, people who don't eat well, but older people who are more sedentary. So this is not going to be as much a concern, one, right before you fast, or in your younger people and younger people who are very active, like that, go out and work out every day or whatever. So most of his warnings, I believe, were in the context of diabetes, not specifically the foods themselves, but we'll look at what we have to say, which I would say with the exception maybe being pasta. So sugar diabetes can be controlled and cured if you only eat right. Stay off sugar and starchy foods and leave those old white potatoes alone. Again, this is in the context of diabetes. Do not eat spaghetti and macaroni at every meal. If you are overweight, do not eat it at any meal. And if you want to live a long time, do not eat it at any meal. Food such as spaghetti and macaroni is processed, not cooked thoroughly, and is hard to digest. How to Eat to Live, Volume 2, page 11. And again, that's referring to all pasta, not just spaghetti specifically. Pasta is really high in gluten, and many people gluten is a protein, and it's a very hard to digest protein. One of the reasons we are supposed to ferment our bread is to help break down gluten and some of those other large proteins in the bread to make it more digestible, as well as to release various nutrients. So that doesn't happen in pasta. So I would say pasta is not a food we should be eating on a regular basis. And I've very much limited mine, as easy as it is to prepare and very inexpensive. And this is why I want to talk about potatoes. He says in volume 2 on page 66, white potatoes do very well. I take this to mean it's a good nutritional food. However, in the context of diabetes, again, he says, but they produce too much starch, which would add fat, and too much fat shortens life. Now, for those of us who are not very active or are older, this is something we should limit. But I don't want to throw the potato out, especially for our young people, because it's a very cost-effective, very nutrient-rich vegetable that is actually a survival food, super easy to grow. Okay. And then rice. And then potatoes are also really high in potassium, which makes them a good food to add to the diet right before your 3-day fast, or right before you're very active, especially if it's hot outside and you're going to be going outside. And then finally, if you must eat rice, we eat rice. And he says that in other places. We eat rice, and he tells us how to prepare it. Here it says, if you must eat rice. Again, I believe, I see this as in the context of diabetes and getting too much starch. So then he tells us how to prepare it. Please brown it thoroughly in your oven or stove, or the top of your stove, with a little butter or oil to keep it from sticking. And so I guess, I see this in the context of rice. If you must eat rice, because again, it can make you prone to diabetes, but we have to eat something. So which of these are best? So let's do a little bit of a comparison. Okay, so first I want to talk about our potatoes, which I just think have gotten such a bad rap. I feel sorry for the poor potatoes. So it's a simple food with great value when understood in context. It's nourishing, it's versatile, it's a great survival food. In fact, we know that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, he said him and his followers survived on white potatoes when they were in prison. So, but let's look at the potential concerns, which is what I think some of us have seen in Eat to Live. For those of us who, again, are prone to gain weight or to diabetes, it produces a rapid rise in glucose. So they're high in starch, and they can raise blood sugar quickly, especially when hot, mashed, or fried. This can support fat storage, especially in sedentary people, people who are insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, diabetic, or, already are overweight. All right. However, preparation matters, right? Unhealthy fats can contribute to that whole thing, especially if you're eating fries or something. However, context is key. Active individuals, growing children, and those doing physical labor use carbohydrates much more efficiently. The needs of the sick, the sedentary, are totally different than the needs of the athletic and the growing. They're not the same. So if you have a large family, potatoes might be something you want to consider, especially because they help break up the soil. They're easy to grow. They store for 3 months without having to do anything to them. And they're actually extremely nutrient rich. So they're a high source of potassium, vitamin C, vitamin B6, and many other different nutrients. They're highly digestible. They're easy on the digestive system. They're very satiating, which means you're actually going to eat less of them. Have you ever started on a bag of chips and you finish it? I'm like, I just can't buy these because, even if they're made with avocado oil, I just can't stop eating them, right? Potatoes are very satiating, so you're less likely to overeat them. And you should actually combine them with some really good quality butter, right? Which helps your body to actually absorb some of the nutrients from them, but also makes them even more satisfying to you, okay? They're easy to grow. They thrive in many climates, high yield store well, ideal for the uncertain times that we're moving into. And they've been historically proven to sustain populations and prevented famine. So something to consider, but let's actually kind of compare and contrast these different carbohydrates. So if you have young people or right before a fast, which carbohydrate should you choose? Again, before a fast, these are high in potassium, vitamin C, and B6, all great in terms of fasting. Now, our navy beans are as well. So maybe the older adults limit themselves to just the navy beans, but if you are trying to provide enough carbohydrates for a growing family, potatoes are an option that you should think about. Okay. So your carbohydrate-rich foods all have trade-offs. So we have the food, the strengths, and the potential concerns. We've just talked about the potato. It has many strengths: potassium, digestibility, it's a survival food, but it can contribute to diabetes, especially if eaten too often. Rice is easy to digest if prepared properly, right? It's gluten-free, but it is actually high in arsenic. It doesn't have the high potassium. It has a lower nutrient density, okay? And it still is going to contribute to potentially to diabetes. Pasta has slower digestion, but the reason it has slower digestion is because it has these proteins that are really hard to digest and can be really hard on the digestive system and the enzymes. And with pasta, it's not like bread. Bread, we're supposed to ferment to break down those proteins. The pasta generally is not fermented. So it can actually be quite hard on the digestive system because it does have slower digestion. It doesn't peak your blood glucose quite as much, but it can wear out your digestive system. It also may have phytates in it that prevent the absorption of really important minerals. And for those who are sensitive to gluten, obviously, it can be a problem. Okay. So, of these, I think potato is a really good option, but you may want to prepare it a little differently to prevent that high glucose spike. Okay. And again, this is for people who need those extra carbohydrates, not for those of us who one bowl of navy bean soup can get us through 3 days, right? Okay. So how we prepare our carbohydrates affects how our body metabolizes them. They found that when you make potatoes and then you cool them and like maybe make a potato salad, or even if you reheat them gently later, they actually form something called resistant starch. And this starch is actually is not absorbed as quickly by the body. And it actually feeds the microbiome. So it's a really, really healthy food for the microbiome. And then the microbiome, these microbes that are breaking down the starch, the bacteria actually produce butyrate, which is really, really anti-inflammatory. So this resistant starch can be really healthy for us. So, making the potatoes and then gently reheating them or putting them like in a potato salad and eating the next day can actually really have benefits to preventing its ability to drive diabetes. That doesn't mean you can eat as many potatoes as you want if you're pre-diabetic. It just means it's a way to incorporate it into your diet. Okay, rice. Obviously, parching actually reduces the arsenic. That's one of the main reasons I think we do it. And rinsing and soaking helps reduce those other anti-nutrients like phytates and things like that I've talked about before, and also improves digestibility. So pasta, wheat, if you had fermented pasta, it would be better. You cook it slower, it's going to be better. It improves digestibility and reduces phytates. But honestly, I would think that is actually the least nutritious and beneficial option of the three. Okay, so we finished everything. We can go celebrate with a 3-day fast. I think that's next week for me. But so your key 3-day fast supports: add slightly more carbohydrates on that Thursday night to support your system. And high potassium carbohydrates like navy beans, potatoes, and bananas can be a good thing to incorporate into your diet that day pre-fast. Add a little salt to water and drink it periodically during the day once you're in your fast to stabilize if you feel that need, especially if you've had some exercise or something, or if it's hot out. Make sure you're warm enough because you're just increasing your physiological stress by shivering or feeling cold. Monitor and address any cortisol that might be peaking by adding salt, electrolytes, and just reducing those stressors. Consider potassium. Again, you may or may not feel comfortable considering coconut water and or magnesium glycinate at night to help with muscle relaxation and sleep. And limit to 1 cup of coffee, y'all. Some people are doing 2 cups of coffee. So this 1 cup of coffee, whether it's one meal a day or during our 3-day fast, what that's doing is reducing that cortisol spike, right? And just giving your body just enough to tell it, no, you're not in survival mode. You don't need to go all out and turn on all the bells and alarms. There's still enough here, right? And if you do more than one, you're increasing the caffeine, which can increase the cortisol rise, and you're getting those extra calories and actually starting to break your fast every time you add more sugar or even more butter to that. And if you don't have the sugar and butter with it, you're going to really push that cortisol. So you're going to push your body to be more stressed out. Okay. And so limit it to one, and that's going to reduce your cortisol, and put a little butter, little cream in there. That's going to reduce that cortisol and make that transition smoother. Consider bone broth to break your fast if that's something that feels comfortable for you. And thank you for joining me, you guys, and have an amazing 3-day fast. Alhamdulillah.